Thank you for visiting my channel. Please do not forget to press the subscribe button. Give a thumbs up for like, share, and leave a comment. I would appreciate that very much. Now, my name is Winifred Davis, and I'm going to read. I like to read. It's not that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to forget anything. I have been a psychic, medium, shaman, traditional healer, counselor for approximately 37 years, or more than 37 years actually. I'm also an author, essayist, poet, and a former spoken word movement performer. I subscribe to no religion. I believe in universal justice and truth. With the imposter justice of man, there is an exception to every rule. With universal justice, there are no exceptions to its rules. There is no my side, your side to the truth. The truth stands unopposed. Now, please remember that I'm not here to convert anyone or to lead anyone for that matter. And I do not wish to be the leader of anything, and I do not want anyone to lead me. My duty is only to my conscience, the light that guides my free will. Each of us was given a conscience and a free will at creation, and it is the conscience that is the light that guides that free will, and that conscience is what links us back to the Creator. What I prefer to say, that's something that is greater than us. Now, I'm just a vessel, a messenger. I'm filled with blemishes. Oh yes, I have a lot of blemishes. And I'm far from perfect, but this is what I chose in this particular lifetime to do, to be a vessel, a messenger, to deliver messages from the collective. And that collective is comprised of my many guides, members of the higher hierarchies, including the angelic realm. Now, consequently, my messages and what I have to say might be rather harsh and brutal at times, but such is the truth. Only by facing the truth, looking into our mirror of self-reflection, can we do better, become better people. Sometimes the image that we see, the reflection that we see in that mirror of self-reflection, it's not a pretty one. I know that. Now, I am fulfilling my self-soul contracts, my Venusian contracts, and my Neptunian contracts. And you can see my books that I've listed below, some of them anyways, that will explain those terms. And I'll just show you here. This is one of the latest, another one, and another one. Now, one just came out. It was published on Monday. I don't have a copy as yet for it. It's being shipped to me right now. But this is, I hope you can see well the picture. Okay, that's the cover of that one. It is called Two Faces, Cyrus' Bill of Rights, and Hitler's Aryan Paradise. And now I'm just giving you a snippet in these 3 videos that I'm doing. This is the 3rd one of some of the things in that book. Now, as I was saying, I'm not here to lead anyone or convert anyone. Each man must evolve according to his own light. Please do not freely interpret what I say. Say exactly what I say. And if you do not understand something, feel free to email me. My email address is listed below along with the books. Or you can go on my website or leave a comment and I'll get back to you. If I say blue, I mean all shades of blue. I didn't say sky blue, marine blue, royal blue, navy blue, baby blue. I said blue. And if I say that a tiny fish is swimming in a small aquarium, that's exactly what I mean. Sometimes when we freely interpret or take things out of context, we end up hearing that that tiny fish became a whale. Now, a whale is not even a fish, it's a mammal. And that small aquarium has suddenly become a vast ocean. There's a whole lot of difference between a small aquarium and a vast ocean. Now, at times this channel is about reincarnation, the truth that is reincarnation and its facts. But at times, I will discuss at length current events because they're relevant to proving the truth that is reincarnation and its facts. Now, this is a very special time in which we live, what I call a cup runneth over period of greater transition that only happen ever so often. Now, it happens ever so often because this time is when there is just so much incurred karma that we will need mass forgiveness, unconditional forgiveness, and unconditional love to bring the scales back into some semblance of equilibrium. Now, as I like to say as well, this time is special and it happens every once in a while. It sometimes feels as if it is the apocalypse or end times or Armageddon, but it's not. Armageddon, end times, Revelation, these always happen on smaller scales, but every once in a while, the cup runneth over, period, happens, and that's when everything on earth is affected. So the climate right now for everyone is in crisis. Not crisis, but in crisis, plural. Human beings are in crisis, not crisis. And everything else on this planet is in crisis. Now, when I receive my visions and messages, because I often get a lot of them, I will often share them with you at the beginning of each video. Now, this is a 3-part series and this is the third one, so I did share my latest ones in the first video in part 1. Now, I have to add here, please, and if you've been following my videos, you will know I'm always talking about Gaza and the West Bank because, my guys, this is the conflict that they wish to concentrate on for many reasons. And if you read my book, I give you those reasons, some of those reasons anyways. Now, so please do not forget that there is no peace in Gaza and the West Bank right now. The genocide, the ethnic cleansing, the horrors, especially against children, my God, still continues unabated. It has now spread to Lebanon and, if permitted, to Iran. and perhaps to other places. The crisis in the Sudan is beyond horrific. But because some of the, I want to call them the fomenters, who have helped to stoke this civil war, genocide and ethnic cleansing, they're preoccupied at this moment, and that includes Israel, with the war on, not with, but the war on Iran, the Great Persia. Now, remember, before I get into the crux of the matter here, remember that all children of countries that are the perpetrators of conflicts, or children of the victims in these conflicts, remember all of them. Have empathy for all of them. There's always empathy in our cup. It's infinite. And there is always a tear to spare for every child on this earth, because none of them, whether they have to run from rockets or run to shelters in Israel or wherever, or they are the children in Iran. For example, those more than 170 children, schoolgirls, little girls who were butchered by America, or in Lebanon, and of course Gaza. None of them deserve to live in misery, because every child should be free to play, to learn. They have a right to food, to shelter, to water, to medicine, and fuel. They deserve to be children. They deserve to be free. Now, you can tell that's the condition of children is one of my pet peeves, and what they have to go through in wars because of adults in their quest for power and their forever wars. Now, The Two Faces, my books are available, by the way, on Amazon, and now this is for entertainment purposes only. Don't forget now, what I have to say here, I grudgingly say, is for entertainment purposes only. We can think of history in rhyme and verbatim. History always repeats itself. It's like a broken record or record on rewind. Now, in part 2, we looked at the reincarnation of some of the souls from the Third Reich. Now remember, this channel is about reincarnation. Now, these reincarnated souls have not changed. And I spoke about them in part 2 and went into details about one in particular who now sits at the head of the American, what I call Manchurian regime, which I explained in part 2 as well, and I believe in part 1. And I refer to him as to this entity as the whore of Babylon, and you can look that up. Take it in the broad context, but it's mentioned in Revelations. Now remember, I subscribe to no religion, but however, I will often refer to examples from the Bible, might be in also in books used by the Abrahamic faiths. Okay, the whore of Babylon, some say it's meant to be Rome, and they have different interpretations, but take it in the broad context. I also refer to him as my guides referred to him when they gave me that vision in March of 2025 as the golden calf. But the gold is not real, it's fake. And after, they also gave me the man with the cloaca mouth, and I go into that explanation why they refer to him as the man with the cloaca mouth, because birds, chickens, okay, cloaca is the butt of a chicken. And if you notice, he has the mark of Cain because his mouth, when he speaks, is shaped like a cloaca. And in Jamaica, they would say, the man just a chat like in just nyam fowl, batty, the butt of a chicken. And I never really fully understood that. I knew it meant you had diarrhea of the mouth and you kept no secret, you just keep talking. But I did not know the details of why they chose the butt of a chicken to say that proverb. And my guide showed me when they labeled he who sits in the people's house in America, when they labeled him, gave him the mark of Cain, and they said that's the mark of Cain. Look at the mouth. Is because chickens, birds in general, as soon as they eat, they poop. Now, if we did that, we would consider it that we have diarrhea, right? So that's what it means, diarrhea of the mouth. Now, when you have diarrhea of the mouth, you keep nothing secret. You speak. One should never tell someone like that their secrets. And if they invite you to their home, maybe you shouldn't eat, because they will let everybody know how much you ate, what you ate, and what have you. And if, for example, you have to relieve yourself and there are no facilities available, and so you're doing it by the side of the road, if you see someone like that, they would say in Jamaica, you sit down in it. That means you sit in it. Spread your dress or whatever over so they will never know what you're doing, because they will take your business, go abroad. They will spread your business. They'll tell everyone. And alas, it was very fitting, the description that my guides gave me. They're roasters when they're ready, but the images that they sometimes show, it's sort of funny. Actually, those images are funny at times. Okay, so they call him the man with the cloaca mouth. And we went into great detail in part 2 of who he was, Ernst Röhm, from the Third Reich. Okay, now getting back to part 3 here. These reincarnated souls have not changed. They tend to recreate actions and scenes from their last journey. In this video, part 3, we will survey some of the scenes and actions of these reincarnated souls in recreating and creating Hitler's Aryan paradise. History repeats itself in rhyme or verbatim. This is a fact of the truth that is reincarnation and its facts, because miscreant souls, in attempting to cheat karma, do not reincarnate in their proper soul cycles and choose not to expiate and learn so they can advance and restore their soul. Eventually they will, but they're just slow at doing it. It's not a question of if, but one of when. Because they choose not to learn, like madmen, they keep doing the same thing, repeating the same incorrect actions over and over again, expecting different results. And we can look, as I will go back to, like Israel. Brute force. All the time, brute force. They keep doing the same thing, and each time, as I like to say, when we use brute force on others, it only works as long or until they react with a greater force against you. They no longer fear your brute force because they've developed a greater force than yours. Now, in the Third Reich, substance abuse and addictions, promiscuity, prescribed misogyny, violence, corruption were par for the course within the leadership, within the Nazi leadership. Rome and the SA, the brown shirts, were known for their violence, lawlessness, lewd behavior, verging on a thin line between what was legal or illegal. Of very young Rome, this is with Rome now, Ernst Röhm, and forgive my pronunciation, he was known for his often very young among lovers and pedophilia. So he kind of walked that thin line between very young men, lovers, and now remember, pedophilia can be heterosexual or homosexual, okay? But he was homosexual. Ernst Röhm was. And so he walked that thin line, where they were very young, but just maybe questionable or not questionable as to whether they were underage. And public drunkenness. The German population had a drug problem, and mood enhancing drugs or uppers were available even in German grocery stores after World War I to combat the national depression. This went on into the 1940s. Most armies, by the way, use psychoactive drugs, including the United States. So you wonder sometimes why so many veterans are addicted, become addicts. Some in the leadership of the Nazis, or the Nazi Party, including Adolf Hitler, were drug abusers of drugs including amphetamine, cocaine, opiates, barbiturates. Goering was addicted to morphine. Now, Adolf Hitler, he was addicted to a lot of stuff that his particular doctor fed him. Now, there were sexual promiscuity and infidelity. Most in the Nazi leadership, including Goebbels and Himmler, kept mistresses and were serial adulterers. Goebbels was a notorious womanizer. His wife Magda, she also had affairs. There was incest, as was alleged in the case of Hitler with his half-sister's daughter, Geli Robol. It is reported that she was a prisoner in the apartment he shared with her and was not allowed to socialize. He asked her mother, his half-sister, for her hand in marriage. Now, Geli, according to some reports, shot herself in the head when Hitler departed for Berlin because she wanted him to end his relationship with Eva Braun. Allegedly, seeing her brain when he was called back to the scene in the apartment where she committed suicide, which was the apartment she shared with him, convinced Adolf Hitler that he should indeed do what he had always wanted to do, become a vegetarian, which might have been one of the causes of his meteorism. That's where you're always passing gas. His meteorism was allegedly so bad that it prompted one Nazi socialite to request that the windows be opened as Hitler left the room. That was after an event. He suffered from chronic stomach problems, and this actually was a carryover for the entity that was Hitler. It was a carryover from his previous lifetime in Tudor England, where the entity died. He was English, but he was one of the nobles that was conducting the war in Ireland for England. It was a carryover. He died of dysentery in Ireland. Now, the entity that was Hitler had many other health issues, but he also consumed daily cocaine, methamphetamine, and barbiturates, opiates, potassium bromide, and atropa belladonna in the form of Dr. Coster's anti-gas pills. Allegedly, Hitler had wavered in becoming, all this information is detailed in my books. Allegedly, Hitler had wavered in becoming a vegetarian, but once again, he was convinced to do so after the scene in the apartment following his niece's suicide. Now, in the Western world, the view that meat consumption was aesthetically repulsive, productive of spiritual grossness, and unhealthy appears to have been first espoused by the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca. For the Bible Christian sect, founded by William Cowherd towards the end of the 18th century, only vegetarians were permitted entry into his church, if you want to call it that. It is not surprising that in 1830, some members of the Bible Christians found their way to Philadelphia in America, the breeding ground, as we discussed in part 1, the breeding ground for extremism and different types of cults, religious and otherwise. That's what America is. Now, in Europe during the 19th century, there was a growing number of who advocated for vegetarianism and the protection of animals. Richard Wagner, the essayist, composer, and theater director, and a racist, co-opted by the Nazis, as they did Nietzsche, except Nietzsche, well, no one knew of him to have been a racist, but they misinterpreted, with the help of his sister, who didn't really understand Nietzsche's writings and philosophy. They co-opted Nietzsche. Was a vegetarian, and it was Wagner's example that Hitler followed. According to Wagner, the purity of the Aryan race was compromised by meat eating and miscegenation. That's the mixture of the races. Hitler and other Nazis were lovers of animals, and many of them became vegetarians, with Goebbels declaring that meat eating is a perversion in our human nature, and that Christianity was a symptom of decay, since it did not urge vegetarianism. Now, beginning in 1933, and this is interesting, the Nazis enacted what was a slew of animal rights and protection laws and regulations. There was even a special law of how to cook lobsters and crab, which were to be quickly thrown into the rapidly boiling water so they wouldn't suffer. Severe punishment included a stay in a concentration camp if any of these laws were contravened. Now, in the partially reconstituted Nazi regime, which is America today, some have alcohol and substance abuse issues. There's infidelity, abuse of women, alleged and proven rapes, sexual abuse and assaults, bondage, kidnapping, serial adultery, and the list goes on. Magda Goebbels, as I said before, engaged in affairs, as did her husband, Paul Joseph Goebbels. Now, we are not here to judge when I mention these things, because addiction, no matter what the addiction is a serious issue. But I cite these events to demonstrate history repeating itself as souls continue to do what they did in other lifetimes when they are not ready to advance up the ladder of soul restoration. And the hypocrisy that we so often see with supremacist ideology and practices. And we see that, for example, in the Conservative Party or the Republicans, the MAGA people. We see a lot of that in, doesn't matter what country you're in, what I call the back to the good old days politics. The parties that advocate back to the good old days, they usually are rife with hypocrisy, and I discuss that at length in the books that I've listed below. As they tout, for example, family values, cast the first stone, and point their index finger at others while their thumb points back at them. Indeed, when we point our index fingers at someone, our thumb points back at us, including all the other fingers, but they're sort of hidden. We have expressed before how addiction in one of my first books on the journey of the soul, how the soul views addiction and adultery. Okay, and we don't try to cast judgments on adultery because intention is always the reason. Okay, it is not the reason, but intention is what will determine whether an action is a spiritual mistake or not. Now, carryover illnesses or weaknesses such as addictions are a fact of the truth, that is reincarnation. Addictions are weaknesses of the spirit. It takes time. For many, once they reincarnate, they will eschew that to which they were addicted. We did not cover the entity that was Hitler in part 2, or in my book I don't really give much detail about him. But in this lifetime, and he is in this lifetime, but at this time, my guides have not permitted me to say anything. At a later date, we will. And it will be very interesting. But in this lifetime, the entity, and I use that instead of who when I say entity, that is or was Hitler, is very conscious of his health. Now remember how he was in Nazi Germany and what happened to him when he was in Tudor England and died of dysentery. The entity now rarely imbibes alcohol or smoke. It is clean living. Although the entity reincarnated quickly, that entity has not carried over the drug addiction that he had. The entity takes care of what it eats. Its intestinal issues was a carryover, as I said before, from the dysentery that caused his death during Tudor times. The entity that was Ernst Röhm was a heavy drinker. In this lifetime, that entity does not drink but is addicted to other things, some seemingly benign, like Coke or Pepsi or whatever it is. As scandals surrounded the sex life and habits of the entity then as Rome, so it does now, and might very well lead to its demise. And we see that unfolding right now. Now, the 1923, and I'm going to list the events now. The 1923 Beer Hall Putsch, or insurrection, during what would be a political meeting, was repeated on January 6th in America, 2021, during what we might consider a political meeting of the Congress to certify the elections. Here, the violence was reminiscent of the tactics used by the Brown Shirts, or SA, the Brown Shirts founded by Ernst Röhm, to terrorize and subdue the population. As in the Beer Hall Putsch of 1923 in Germany, there was the plot to kidnap the vice president, as the Nazis who kidnapped von Kahr. As in the Beer Hall Putsch, people including policemen were killed and injured. The violence and lawlessness of these miscreants continue today, as we hear one of the reincarnated Nazis instruct drivers to drive their cars through protesters. There were deaths during the Beer Hall Putsch, but the perpetrators, and I say perpetrators and I spell it as P-E-R, P-E-T-R-A-I-T-O-R-S. I like to play with words. Were given slaps on the wrist, which saw them come back to power with a vengeance and eliminate those whom they viewed stood in their way during the failed insurrection. This happened at the night of the Long Knives, which would be about I think more than 8 years after the Beer Hall Putsch in Germany, where Hitler killed Rome. They made certain that they also executed those who had opposed them during the Beer Hall Putsch. Now, those involved in January 6, 2021, insurrection who were convicted were all given pardons, while the leaders were never held to account and have now returned with a vengeance and score-settling grievance. You know, the three G's that rule America at this moment: grift, greed, and grievance. Now, during the night of the Long Knives, as I mentioned, in addition to the leadership of the SA, those scores were settled, and it included von Kahr. Now, his equivalent would have probably been Mike Pence, and Gregor Strasser, who was shot in his cell on the orders of Reinhard Heydrich, deliberately left to bleed to death. Now, we see what is happening, or what happened, because these are excerpts from my book. So I wrote that months and months and months ago. The books were published. We see what happened in Los Angeles as the regime tried to manufacture a crisis to declare martial law and deny civil liberties, so that it can begin to imprison and purge its opponents. We also see the assault of ICE in Minnesota and Washington, D.C. There will be more of these. The Nazi, and so it's good to oppose these actions. The Nazi antecedent was the Reichstag fire on February 27th, 1933, and the fire decree, which was the end, the death knell of civil liberties and democracy in Germany. The arsonist was not known as, for the fire. They don't know who the arsonist was. But like everything else, it was more than likely set by the miscreants in the Nazi leadership to create conditions to ride in like the knight on the white horse to save the day. And an excuse, of course, to squash civil liberties. And that's something that is one of the, you find in the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices, where they love to create the reality on the ground, create situations which they will come in after and say, oh, they're the white knight. You know, it's like the brigands who kidnapped the maiden who was not in distress, take her, hide her in the forest, and then they reappear on a white stallion or steed, or maybe a palomino, and then they come in as if they are the white knight ready to save the damsel who is now in distress. You know, it's sort of like the sheep, the wolf. He goes and acts as if he's there to protect the sheep, but then he's the one who's going to eat the sheep. Now, this Goebbels was an expert as well at arranging events such as these, and then he would spread his propaganda. And it could have been organized by the brown shirts, or maybe both of them coordinated. Now, this was the same modus operandi that was used. A false flag operation when Nazi soldiers dressed as Polish soldiers fired at Nazi soldiers to provide the pretext for the Polish invasion. And this plot with Poland was hatched by, and we covered him in part 2, Reinhard Heydrich. Now, the Nazis were more efficient than they are now in the American Manchurian regime. Right now, they're very incompetent, and in a way, thank God, because sometimes the destruction that they could cause, if they were a little bit more competent, we would not want to imagine. The last elections held in Nazi Germany were held on March 5th, 1933, and despite the reign of terror, propaganda, and repression, they only mustered about 40% of the votes. In America, although the American Manchurian regime won the elections, it was not the landslide it had hoped, less than 50%. See the similarities there? The South Korean president manufactured a crisis, but failed because the populace was engaged and refused to countenance this power grab. Will Americans become fully Nazi Germany, or will they be South Korea and save their democracy? We also see businessmen who in the first go-round would not support the Nazis, but did later. In the beginning, they treated the Nazis with contempt. However, later realizing that there was much profit to be made, they joined the regime. Gunther Quandt, the BMW guy, he was also the first husband of Magda Goebbels. I say ex-husband of Magda Goebbels. Friedrich Flick, an arms, steel, and coal magnate, and Kodak are some of the companies. These companies use slave labor in the extermination camps, and some stole Jewish companies. In Poland, Gunther Quandt even built sub-concentration camps and then dismantled them. and I think he did that in Czechoslovakia. Some were given prison sentences at the end of the war. In this American Manchurian regime, in the first go round, which was back in 2016, 2017, a lot of these companies did not engage with them. They pretended as if they were all about freedom and democracy, although there were some who did it clandestinely, and we know who that is. In the first, in this iteration, in this second round, they have enthusiastically engaged, because they're fence sitters. They only care about money. So they've shown their true colors. Now, as we mentioned in video 2, part 2, Otto Dietrich, who is here today, and we discussed him a bit, with his wife back then in Nazi Germany, she played a crucial role because she was from a moneyed family. They played a crucial role as intermediaries between the industrialists and the magnates, in convincing them to support the Nazi Party. And lo and behold, in this reincarnation, Otto Dietrich, he is an intermediary between the American Manchurian regime and the equivalent of the industrialists and magnates back in World War II. Now, by the way, Texas is a crucial state in, weapons manufacturing. I just remembered that and thought I'd add that. Now, we can add Israel to this because it is a part of this destiny, as we see the companies making huge profits in prolonging the carnage and genocide that is happening, especially in Gaza and the West Bank, with the tech companies leading the charge. These are what I call the fence sitters. They only care about money. Some of them, yes, they do have certain ideologies, but at the end of the day, it's all about money and power, and basically enslaving the little man. There's no common human decency there. Now, the legacy or mainstream media have also fallen in line, as in Nazi Germany. They help to spread the propaganda directly or by not doing their job as journalists. As in the Third Reich, there are attacks on cultural and educational institutions, an attempt at controlling the thought of more than 300 million people in America. We recall that this would be in line as well with the Powell Memorandum. That's what he advocated, which served as a blueprint for the manifesto of the Heritage Foundation and what we now know, another iteration of this Project 2025. Now, and we also see this with the takeover as well of the media landscape and all such companies, CBS, you name it, so that they can control the narrative and, billow the smoke. There'll be more smoke, more of the media to give us fake news and false information and squash freedom of speech. Now, there are other repetitions of history happening in America that coincide with what happened in Nazi Germany. But the last one we will mention is the rounding up of the undesirables and the complicity of the population, a large percentage of the population. Undocumented immigrants, fortunately in America right now, it's not as many as was present in Nazi Germany. Undocumented immigrants have replaced the Jews in the American Manchurian regime. Roma Sinti, black people, disabled, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, Poles, political opponents, and other undesirables. In Nazi Germany and occupied Nazi territories, citizens reported on their neighbors. Now, this is currently happening in America as neighbors report their neighbors to ICE. We might also recall this during the period of what we could call the decolonization in during Stalin's reign in the Soviet Union, when, well, the kulaks, they were serfs who, after serfdom was abolished, they bought a lot of land, they became farmers, they became very successful. And during one of Stalin's pogroms, they decided that they needed to confiscate the lands of the kulaks, who refused, they weren't into the communal thing. And so their neighbors would report them. And I think it's over 1 million of them. They were Russians. They weren't immigrants. They were Russians. Their neighbors would report them because then, they would maybe profit from, land and whatever that these people would now be dispossessed of. So they would report them. And in Cuba, the 1992 song Informer by Canadian reggae artist Snow was used to inform people sometimes when the authorities would be in the neighborhood. Because of the reporting of one neighbor by another, we will now look at the repeat of history with the different crime scenes. Okay, so now we're going to look at crime scenes like Nazi Germany, verbatim, as in Israel, and in rhyme. How to repeat the crimes of history and get away with it. In this go-round, the miscreants believe that they have figured out a way to enact their cruelty and crimes and get away with it. Literally get away with murder and abscond responsibility. The target is, in America, imprint, mask, black, so black people, and all who are not white, and like Nazi Germany, the sick, the disabled, LGBTQ, and non-Christians. They can escape consequences because they can send the undesirables to concentration camps and theaters of war and not be held responsible. They had a dry run during the George W. Bush administration with its black sites, and they had another dry run during the 45th administration, and this was during COVID, the COVID epidemic. When the studies came out showing that BIPOC, so Black Indigenous Peoples of Color, were more at risk from COVID, and that link was to a vitamin D deficiency, we observed that was when the anti-mask, and you can go back with the news, newspaper, news reports, and you can trace it. That was when the anti-mask crusade was injected with a more than normal dose of steroids. There's always an anti-mask crusade, but during COVID, it went overboard, and it was after the reports came out, the studies showing that it was BIPOC who were most affected, so they thought, by COVID. Now, that is also when the blue states were denied masks, medicine, PPI in a designed effort in cruelty to depopulate as much as possible America of its BIPOC population, and especially during an election year. There were governors who had to hide to bring in PPE, lest they were hijacked by federal agents directed by an administration determined to kill. And now, I'm not hyperbolic here. These are facts. These determined to kill as many BIPOC as possible in an election year. This is not conjecture or a conspiracy theory. It was as given and memorialized and proven accurate. When I first saw, when the studies first came out, I said to my son, I said, oh my God, I pray they didn't have to put out this study. But of course it was to benefit people so that they would be aware. Because I said, do you realize what they're going to do? Now they're going to deny masks and PPE to a lot of states and cities that have an abundance, should we say, or have large populations of people who are BIPOC. And so said, so done. Now, as I said, we can check the types of media reports and plot the trajectory of what we cite here. The entity spearheading that campaign then, who was the czar, is the same entity that is behind the current war on Iran, the raising of Gaza to build resorts, and destruction all over the Middle East so that they can have building projects for years to come and make their resorts. This is the entity who has also, or that has also, pimped out American intelligence to enrich itself. This entity is only behaving as it did in another lifetime, then as mass gender and a prostitute. Now, these miscreant souls, and when I say prostitute, if you're a prostitute and that's how you earn your living, I am not saying that. When I say prostitute, I'm just stating a fact. That's what that entity was then. Right? Now, these miscreant souls did not realize that the red state's turn would also arrive. History teaches us that today for me, tomorrow for you. That's Jamaican. In other words, today for me, tomorrow will be your turn. Do not rejoice at my misfortune. Your turn will come. The same preconditions that plague many BIPOC also plague white Americans, because economics and class and lifestyle often trump race. At the end of the day, lack of health care, sedentary lifestyle, bad diets, and the list goes on, and poverty, of course. They are more alike than they believe. They have poor white people and poor black people, or BIPOC, have more in common with the inequities that they endure. So the wealthy, the fat cats, can live in style. Pandemics do not care who you are. Man in his arrogance, fallen angels that we are, believe so. The trajectory of COVID-19 was no different from that of the Spanish flu, with the deniers, anti-vaxxers. The vaccines didn't work then. The government that tried to hide it for political purposes, Wilson, and on and on. And COVID's return in waves, more devastating than the first. Now, some of those who spearheaded the mission to cleanse America, as I said, of its BIPOC, once again, are amongst those who are advocating the ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the West Bank to build resorts because big, important men need to make money. Throughout history, the same thing they will apply also to Lebanon if they get a chance, or Iran. Now that's the prize, that's the pearl, right? And possibly Cuba. Now, throughout history, there have been genocides, mass killings, massacres, ethnic cleansing, and displacement of different target groups. In this special period, as discussed earlier, the miscreants have learned how to commit crimes and get away with it, or so they believe. They have learned that when they are hamstrung by treaties or laws, they can still displace, murder, commit genocide in different ways and cover their crimes. They can globalize their crimes by bribing poor countries. Another way is to empower and give cover to another who is not hamstrung or inconvenienced by the laws of its land, or any other land for that matter. I am only citing Israel and America because of the reasons cited earlier. Now, there are others in the Nazi leadership and other miscreants from different time periods, in different masks and different conflicts, that have strategically reincarnated at this time to complete this play. Miscreants have reincarnated en masse, right? Recall that we suggested, for example, the entities that were Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler have also reincarnated at this time, but I will not divulge which entities they are in this particular lifetime. We must recall that these miscreants do have contracts, as I explained in part 2, that they make in the spiritual world before any reincarnation. Israel and America are examples of the same scenario. The imprint that was the target of the Nazis is now carrying out what the imprint Nazis did in Germany, but in broad daylight. So you have the Jews were the ones against whom genocide was committed. And many of these Nazi reincarnations were rabid, virulent anti-Semites. Some of them have now reincarnated as Jews, and they're about to change the representation that Jews have had with black people and the Roma for centuries and thousands of years of being persecuted. They aim, that's part of their mission in coming back also, because they're mad. They're mad that they've had to bear this, what would you call it, scarlet letter, because of what they did, especially against the Jews. And so they aim to change this representation. I discussed that at length in the books. So let me move on here. Now, they're committing what the Nazis did in broad daylight, and no one is there, as the Allies were there to come to the rescue. Late, but they eventually showed up. No one now is there to come to the rescue of the imprint, the masked Palestinians, who have now in this theater assumed the role of Jews in World War II. This is possible because it has fellow miscreants who now hold the levers of power of the most powerful nation. The first way to carry out the crime and get away with it is to empower others who are not answerable to anyone. Let us recall the paramilitary wings in Hungary and Germany after World War I. In the former, in Hungary, we had the violent gangs that carried out the White Terror, and Julia Gumbos, who is now take it with a grain of salt, Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. So you see, he's into destruction and all of this stuff. He's used to it. That's what he did during the White Terror in Hungary but disease took him before he could carry out even more terror. Now, as I said, in the former we had the violent gangs that carried out the White Terror. In the latter, which then would be Germany, there was the feared and powerful brown shirts, boasting at its height before incorporation with the SS, as many as 4 million recruits, 40 times more than the German army was permitted according to the Treaty of Versailles, and the non-militarization. Hitler could plausibly deny this connection. Israel does this with its settlers, although it sometimes does not deny. Under masks, Republican and Democrat, they have, especially since the 1990s, enabled Israel to be lawless, acting above and outside all the humanitarian and international laws to which most countries adhere. In other words, Israel has acted as the SA, the brown shirts of America, and at times of Western Europe. As the Treaty of Versailles tied Hitler's hands in the beginning, so in like manner have the laws of the United States of America also tied, but not for this American regime, America's hands in what its army can and cannot do. It did, of course, try to work its way around during George W. Bush's administration. He's never been held to account, right? But that's imposter justice of man. Over the decades, there have been breaches and some people are held to account, although not often. During the 43rd, here we go, Bush administration, they often leased out the incorrect deeds, as we said before, to other countries with their black sites. Once again, America has enabled Israel so that it acts as its paramilitary in the interest of each other. A real symbiotic relationship that is at times commensal, parasitic, and mutual. We must recall that over the past 30 years, America has more or less been in a semi-vassal, to some degree, position because of its Zionist Christian American zealots, has more or less, and Mossad, Israel and Zionists, Jews and Christians, compromised politicians. They have a lot of compromise on a lot of American politicians. It's not just all because they can get campaign financing and whatever else. It has been a slow process, but we have arrived at this point where the miscreants are earnestly working at a very fast pace to untie their hands from the laws of the land and become as lawless as its satellite, that's Israel, and convert its army into the equivalent of the SA. The thuggery has now stretched across borders, and this is so because of the octopus of strange bedfellows that has stretched across all borders in this cup runneth over greater period of transition. I will do another video at a later date discussing this. One of the current significant crime scenes is the Middle East. And when I say the Middle East, let's say the greater Middle East, it's Western Asia. So we say Middle East, North Africa, Horn of Africa, and elsewhere. This large crime scene or killing fields is one that would cause envy in many psychopaths and sadists, current or throughout history. The population in the current killing fields, which includes Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, Sudan, Libya, and perhaps later Iraq again, number quite a bit. Over 200 million, and then of course we can also think about the 200 million Muslims in India who are under attack. If current trends continue, other places are slated for instability, including Turkey. the Gulf states, Egypt and Jordan, Pakistan and Algeria. Algeria has oil, remember that. Nigeria has oil, so that might also be on the map for later if current trends would continue. Of course, the entirety of the Americas as well. In America, they're using the workaround. They get their sadistic and psychopathic pleasure of enabling and abetting Israel to replicate the unspeakable horrors and atrocities that Israel is committing in Gaza, and the enactment of the final solution, which began many decades ago and went on steroids after World War II, with more miscreants from World War II reincarnating quickly to continue their incorrect deeds. Israel has already butchered more than 75,000 Palestinians, and I did get a message, and I think it's in video number 15, about the Million Plan. You should read upon that. As to 1,000,000 Gazans, that's what they believe, or that's the aim. So you cut the population in half, and they've figured out how to achieve this with, the starvation and whatever, and however many are made unalive, then, you multiply that by 3 of those who would be maimed, injured, and so on and so on. So you can check that out. That's what my guides gave me, the Million Plan. Now, they've butchered more than 75,000 Palestinians and injured more than 110,000 and counting. A lot more, believe me, a lot more. More than most of them women, children, and babies. There are tens of thousands not counted because they are buried under the rubble that Gaza has become. Like Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, there are about 2.2 million people in Gaza at the time that I wrote this. Okay? And I wrote this part from my book maybe a year and a half ago. Now, they have been under siege since 2006. In October 2023, they were put under almost total siege. Well, we could say it was total siege. Since March 2025, Gaza, like Leningrad, was ordered under complete siege. They are supposed to die with bombs, or made unalive, with bombs falling 24 hours per day and the place flattened as Hitler instructed. This is the history of Leningrad being repeated verbatim in Gaza. Nazi Germany has unfortunately been reconstituted in Israel in words and deeds, and as I say in another book that I should have finished at the end of April, is that Israel is the Third Reich on steroids, but it is not Sparta. They have gone where even the Nazis dared not go. They do not even try to sanitize the killings or the unalivedness with larger gas ovens, as Himmler did after his virgin summer execution in Minsk. They're so convinced in Israel, they're so convinced of their spin, gaslighting, and propaganda, so convinced of the destructive guilt they have elicited by weaponizing the persecution, victimhood, suffering of Jews, and the Holocaust. So convinced of their domination of politicians, especially in America and also in Europe, through their lobby, especially in England as well. Through their lobby, powerful Zion Christian zealots, voting bloc, and compromat, that they commit their crimes unabashedly with nary an ounce of shame or guilt. Live and direct, with the world as spectators. True supremacists. They're arrogant and overconfident and erroneously still believe that they can bamboozle the world they are the last to get the memo that the gig is up and that it will never return. No matter how much of the media landscape they buy up, it will never return to the status quo. It's been too much. And this is in line with Jeffrey Epstein and friends, because he had a lot of compromise on a lot of people, business people and politicians, and it was all, of course, part of it was with Israel. Now, babies are denied formula, right? So, more than 60,000 babies are now in starvation, probably more now. Remember when I wrote this about a year and a half ago. Now, disease stalked the children and people of Gaza. Since March 2025, back then, 100 people were killed per day, even though there was supposedly a ceasefire. It's a little less now, but every day it inches up. It will soon become the norm again. And then, of course, they were using young men as targets, targeting their private parts, and it's all because children are the targets. They aim to make certain that Palestinians will never be able to reproduce, to have children. That is a way around or to cover their genocide. It's absolutely horrible. In any case, now we see in Israel, for example, the use of dogs to do horrible crimes. And this is where we can say that not all of those reincarnated, for example, in Israel or in America, engaged in these atrocities would be Nazis, because of the cruelty that they have shown to animals and the things that they have animals do. The Nazis wouldn't do that. That is proof that those particular souls who engage in such actions were not Nazis. They come from other lifetimes. Now, Hitler, as I said, he loved his two dogs. During his brief, laughable incarceration for high treason, during which time he wrote Mein Kampf, he was allowed visits with his beloved Alsatian. Now, the entity that is Benjamin Netanyahu, and as I said formerly, and take it with a grain of salt, Julia Gumbosh, is here to complete the journey he did not finish in Hungary. Now in an imprint he despised because he was a virulent anti-Semite, but in order to become Prime Minister of Hungary, he needed the support of Jews, so he, like he did now with the extremists, but as far as I'm concerned, he is even more extreme than his extremist partners, political partners. He actually partnered with them because that was the only way. He needed their support, but he was a virulent anti-Semite, and he actually came up with I think it was numerous clauses. Some was the first law enacted, to how would I put it, to corner Jews, so to speak, like segregate them. They weren't allowed to have more than this type of, amount of education and so on. So, how anti-Semitic he was. So he now has reincarnated in the mask of Jew, or imprint I call it, so he can realize his dream to build an empire. He always wanted the greater empire, but sickness took him, can realize his dream to build an empire and be emperor or king, and to kill, make unalive as many people as he can to satisfy his psychopathic and sadistic desires, his lust and revelry in blood. This will demand that he commits displacement, mass butchery, and genocide. He now has the most powerful with him, miscreants in crime, that he can do whatever he does in the glaring sun of broad daylight with the world as spectators. The entity does not even have to make what appears to be deals with souls he despised, as he did in Hungary, having to make an agreement, as I said, with the powerful Jewish group of industrialists. All the people with whom he makes deals now are of his ilk, even if we believe through the temporal lens that they're strange bedfellows. They are not, through the spiritual lens. In his arrogance, he is certain he will get away with murder. Now, he's the leader of a country also filled with a gathering of psychopathic and sadistic energies, a society not unlike Nazi Germany, perhaps worse, a morally bankrupt society where too many of the souls are bereft of humanity, common decency, whether active participants or in silent acquiescence, too wrapped up in their selfishness, unable to feel the pain of others. And of course, they've been brainwashed, but each of us is responsible for our own actions. So they become paranoid. Everyone's out to get them. Now, I say this, and this sounds like a generalization, but unfortunately, the polls bear this out, that the majority, over 75% of Israeli Jews, Zionist Jews, believe, are of this mindset, and that's very, very sad. And I pray that they will see the light sooner rather than later. Now, we are by no means minimizing October 7th, 2023. The great powers now will not only be late coming to the table, but they will also be absent, for they too are miscreants. In the different crime scenes, miscreants are trying to top the numbers they had in Nazi Germany. This is the number to top of all the different crime scenes throughout history. The entity and his followers, this is the entity who is now Netanyahu, can engorge themselves in the blood in the large killing fields of the Middle East. Now, the cruel games that these reprobates, psychopaths and sadists, all miscreant souls play, imagine. Were we to present this scenario for a movie, we would be told they are too impossible and depraved to be real. Alas, the truth is stranger than fiction. We are witnessing in front of our eyes, scenes that some say were even worse than Nazi Europe. Children and babies vaporized without a trace of them left by weapons developed by America. The open skies are the shelter for many. We have not discussed Sudan and the DRC, but they're also part of the larger equation. As mentioned previously, it is not because these wars and others are any less important, but because that in the Middle East was written in stone, so to speak. You might note here that Netanyahu, ever the arrogant miscreant, a true reprobate, believing that he can outsmart everyone because his intelligence is superior above all else, is now trying to ensnare countries from the global south, most of them colored peoples, that he considers subhuman savages who are not of his Judeo-Christian Western civilization, whatever that is, fraternity, to be complicit in his war crimes of ethnic cleansing and genocide, he will, of course, with the aid of money stolen from American taxpayers and given to the millionaires and billionaires by America's compromised, corrupt politicians and the scavengers and vultures that follow the vampire that is revenge. Please see my poem in video, I think it's video 5. Because they too are corrupt, miscreant souls. They might be wise. These colored peoples in these poor countries might be wise not to aid Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel in their attempt to legitimize and, according to some, globalize his grave war crimes, sending Palestinians to war zones and countries that can ill afford to take care of their population is Netanyahu's and his accomplices' way of ensuring that Palestinians would be hunted and made unalive in those countries. In other words, he wants to ensnare others to finish his genocide and create of the Palestinians not the wandering Jew, but the wandering Palestinians. They are these people from the global south. And we know that they will be held accountable. All these colored peoples who help Israel to globalize genocide and ethnic cleansing. They must remember, these colored peoples, that their backs are not as broad as that of the miscreant that is Benjamin Netanyahu. According to these paragons of human rights and Christian Judeo-Western civilization, international courts are for Africans, people from the global south and Eastern European dictators. See how quickly they issued a warrant and captured Duterte of the Philippines. Detention centers, concentration camps, and slave markets at home and abroad. The second crime scene begins in America and traverses many borders as America outsources its immigration and enforcement or deportations and displacements. It pays countries to accept migrants in infamous concentration camps located at the edge of jungles or soon to come in war zones where people, including children, are traded on the slave market. Yes, in this day and age in Libya, tortured and sexually abused. And we must remember, Libya is what it is now is a result of the dystopia that Israel and the neocons in America aim to create of every single Muslim state so that they will be the top dogs. They will be the hegemon of that region. Now, this amounts to state-sanctioned human trafficking. That's what the American Manchurian regime is involved in. This is like the black sites mentioned earlier. We might also note that the push to increase the number of deportations is also a business in America, where it has been revealed that some in the Department of Homeland Security Agency, especially tasked in detaining and deporting people, have investments in these detention centers in America where people are held pending their deportation. Designed cruelty is the name of the game. Torture, physical, psychological, and sexual abuse of even children have been reported in these American detention centers. People have even died in them. We witnessed Texas and Florida trying to outdo each other in the cruelty game. None is immune from these games, not even, once again, mere children. Even children undergoing cancer treatment. Sometimes people are chained together and made to eat like dogs on the floor. They're given maggot failed food to eat. People disappear. They're kidnapped by masked men. Their whereabouts unknown. These are definitely some of them people who were in the brown shirts in Nazi Germany. It's the same thing being played out here. And I heard the other day that they're planning, whether it's true or not, I don't know. And perhaps because I have not checked, I should mention it, but I'm going to. They're planning on having ovens installed in some of these centers. Now, this is history repeating itself as it has throughout the ages. This history is repeating itself not only in rhyme, but also verbatim. Now, let the children be unalive. The culling of BIPOC. A third crime scene is in the many countries, especially in Africa, that received U.S. aid. As cited earlier, by the end of the year, perhaps more than 1 million children will die because of the cuts carried out by the American Manchurian regime. More than 14 million, it is projected, will die within the next few years. The picture, those cuts were carried out by the world's richest man, and I got a vision for him. Memorialized the night before the election. So let's see what will happen in the future. A fourth, according to Bill Gates, the picture of the world's richest man killing the world's poorest children is not a pretty one. A fourth intended crime scene threatened to extend throughout the Caribbean, Central and South America, and Africa. The American Manchurian regime is threatening nations that use the services of Cuba's medical personnel. Cuba's decades-long medical services to so many underserved countries, especially throughout these areas, has been coined by academics as Cuban medical internationalism. Now, it was indeed Cuba that worked with the Obama administration to help prevent the Ebola outbreak from becoming a pandemic. Had it become a pandemic, it would have made COVID, with all its destruction, look like child's play. This is the time for these nations to stand their ground and not be bullied by miscreants. I'm aware of geopolitics and, like some are dependent on whatever. I'm not immune to that, but there comes a time when we have to take a stand, a principled stand. They have nothing to lose because the American regime, filled with miscreants bent on advancing the deaths of as many as possible of people wearing the masks of race and color, BIPOC. Once again, there are many other crime scenes, but we have focused on those perpetrated largely by America and Israel as instructed. And I must say that the Secretary of State, and now this is tongue-in-cheek and I am but human, who struts around and loves taking pictures with his hands in his pocket. A contrived, I call it, a contrived stance, as if it would make him look like a true statesman, make him look taller and a stalwart, a historic figure. The picture, I can't remember which president it was, standing at that window, pondering on the big issues of the world. Well, this is what this little man does, hands in his pocket, the trying to be, I call it a contrived stance, trying to look like a statesman. He will never go down in history as a statesman, that's for sure. He is the one enacting all these policies and believes, as he says, in colonialism and, the colonial countries, the colonial empire should never have given up their empires. Yes, this little man. I wonder what will become of him. Well, we don't know. Just a little tongue-in-cheek. But we don't know. I'm only human. I like roasting people. As I like to say, I roast myself first, like with my long chin. And so I say, well, I can go chin skating. And if, like some of these brothers who are worried about their chin, these supremacists, they're really obsessed with not having chins, they could probably have some of my chin. Anyways, and then, of course, America is another crime scene. The horrors and casualties, perhaps of millions, from the very young to the very old, that will unfold as the cuts to the CDC, FDA, EPA, and other departments begin to take hold. How many children will die or suffer life-altering disabilities because they will be denied vaccines, for example? How many will die from the loss of their health insurance as these miscreants seek to dismantle the ACA because it was achieved under the administration of a black man? How many will depart this world because of bad advice from miscreant souls who head their health sector? Need we say more? And then, of course, there are the wars on Americans' citizenry by its own government with their masked paramilitaries, like ICE. No different from the brown shirts of Ernst Röhm and the various iterations. Not unlike the governor of Oklahoma during the destruction of Black Wall Street in the 20s, I think it was, who ordered the National Guard to bomb its own citizens. Imagine that. So, is this American Manchurian regime, as it gasses, tortures, beat, and butcher civilians as ordered by a reincarnated Nazi. She was male then in Nazi Germany, and her illicit companion. This entity had falsely claimed that this entity, I should say, was Heinrich Müller. And that Heinrich Müller in Nazi Germany succeeded Reinhard Heydrich as director of the Gestapo. Now, psychopaths, they usually say, usually begin their journey with the murder, the butchery of animals, cats and dogs. It then escalates. First, for her, it was the dogs, and now it has escalated to human beings. Remember, take this with a grain of salt. This is for entertainment purposes only. We have only to look at history. This is indeed the Third Reich on rewind. The evidence is irrefutable. Oil and war. We're almost done. Drill, baby, drill. Indeed, we are on the back pedal, the buttonesque journey, and what might threaten to be wars because of oil. What happened to the climate crisis? Rather than moving forward and weaning ourselves away from our addiction, the opposite is happening. Through the temporal lens, this is what happens with back to the good old days politics and the gerontocracy. Those of us who lack vision. Through the eyes of the soul, we should not be surprised because of the period in which we find ourselves and the reincarnation of souls who are determined to finish their ignoble agenda in their quest for power. We should not be surprised that America and its reincarnated miscreants, many from Nazi Germany, are at the forefront along with other miscreants in different countries who are also from Nazi Germany and other periods of conflict, who are of similar affectations. And I think I explained what I mean. Affectation, I use it in the archaic sense, not as a made up or contrived thing that's not natural, but I go back to its archaic meaning. Now, the story of oil is also one of history, repeats in rhyme or verbatim. The Nazis needed oil to provide fuel to wage their war. However, like supremacists who are never to be trusted, feeling that why settle for buying when you could indeed have it all by just taking it, stealing it. So it turned on its ally, Russia, that provided their oil in its surprise Operation Barbarossa. Operation Barbarossa, with 3 million German soldiers and almost 700,000 Axis troops, was the largest and costliest offensive ever recorded in history. There were more than 8 million casualties in this battle that only lasted for less than 6 months, from June 22nd, 1941 to December 5th, 1941. That operation ended in disaster for Germany, and back then, from 1941, Hitler and others knew that Germany would never win the war. They knew from then, but they continued for 4 more years, resulting in the deaths of so many millions, tens of millions, and the destruction and havoc that they wreaked all over the place. That disaster was not enough for them, so they embarked on another ill-fated operation from July 17, 1942 to February 2nd, 1943 against the city of Stalingrad, present-day Volgograd, which would signal a major turning point in the war. It was not lost on Hitler that he desperately needed the oil supply from the Caucasus. Had he not wanted it all and not betray his ally, who then, that's the Soviet Union, now allied after Operation Barbarossa with the Allies, with England, the United States, Canada, and others, he would not have expended millions of lives and suffered such a significant defeat and would have had oil to run his campaign. He wanted it all and lost all. In Jamaica they say, want all, lose all. Now it is little wonder that some of these reincarnated souls should want to fuel the oil addiction, oil as well as rare earth minerals and water. Israel, amongst others, are driving many of their actions around the world. And so we see the yearning to yesteryears when the West controlled the oil gas resources of the world. It is a return to the days of the Standard Oil Company and BP. The belief is that if we control the oil, water, rare earth minerals, and waterways, we will control the world for millennia to come, perhaps in perpetuity. Now, from South America, including Venezuela to Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, back to Iraq, and of course, Iran, Nigeria, and Iran. Nigeria, under the pretense of defending Christians, and of course they do not and never understand the cultures and the machinations of the countries that they want to invade, because of course, oh please, they're all the same, because they're others, they're less than, so there's nothing to understand about them, and that's where they usually make their grave mistakes, like for example in Iraq and elsewhere, and end up at the end of the day winning tactically, but in the long run losing. Now, Nigeria, under the pretense of defending Christians, give me a break. Algeria, along with Nigeria, also on that list because they have oil. There are other countries as well, some already controlled by miscreants from the same karmic journeys as those miscreants in America. No doubt the attack on Venezuela had as another reason oil to send to Israel in preparation for the attack on Iran, to guarantee that Israel would have enough in reserve while they dealt with a very weak Iran and the very short work that they would have to break the great Persia into tiny parts, or as they say, bomb it back to the Stone Age. Could you imagine these buffoons, the great Persia that has given so much to humanity and civilization, bomb it back to the Stone Age? Now, they're prepared to wage war for it as a win-win situation. Weapons of war is big business and a lucrative one, perhaps the most lucrative. Oil is also lucrative. These probable wars might be other crime scenes, as innocent civilians, including children and babies, might become casualties of these unprovoked conflicts fueled by greed. There will be little care for the casualties because they are the others. There will be more to say about this at a later date. Oil was the major consideration in the sacrifice of the unarmed Iranian soldiers in international waters near Sri Lanka. They were like lambs to the slaughter. While oil was the major consideration, anti-Muslim hatred was the icing on the cake, ensuring that there was not a second thought in sacrificing the lambs. Right there you could see Christian Zionist zealotry, Christofascism, and Hindu nationalism, anti-Muslim, because Muslims are under attack in India. Right there you could see where they joined together, perhaps in the slaughtering of those unarmed Iranian sailors. But then of course we know that in the wink of an eye, the Christofascists would turn on the Hindu nationalists because they see them as those brown people who worship idols. We know that. That's exactly how they think, because they're supremacists. Indeed, the story of oil is important in history on repeat, history on rewind, as it was with Hitler and the Nazis and the reincarnated miscreant souls now. This and other areas of history repeating itself verbatim with other identified miscreant souls, all actors in this period, will be covered in another book to complete this remarkable testament to so many facts of the truth that is reincarnation. Now, these will be divulged when my guides deem it is the right time. And I will just finish here that it is important for us to add that addiction is a serious problem, a weakness in the soul. It is a denial of the spirit. It is the abuse of anything. Addiction is the abuse of anything, including clothes, books, food, drugs, jewelry, sex, alcohol, and money. It is passion gone out of control and becoming vice. Any form of addiction is something that we have no control over. It controls us. Any form of addiction, no matter how it seems benign, is undesirable because we become slaves to that which we are addicted, no longer able to behave according to our free will with our conscience, the light to guide that free will. We sink into the abyss, totally absorbed by the material affinities, no longer having the power of and over them. We are not judging here, and do wish our brothers, even the miscreants from Nazi Germany, we are not judging here, and do wish our brothers with addiction problems well, and that they will overcome their addiction. It is one of the most difficult issues to overcome, and unfortunately many people, perhaps the majority, especially with certain addictions, they end up succumbing to their addictions. We're just stating what is when we speak about it, and just to illustrate certain points and to point out the hypocrisy of these very brothers who berate and judge others of the weaknesses to which they have also fallen prey. Each of us has our own demons, for lack of a better word, with which we contend in our struggle to ascend the ladder of soul restoration. One unintended consequence, I might add here, might be, and it's a good one, that with all that's going on with the war on Iran and the oil problem and gas problem, is that perhaps it might drive us towards green energy faster than we had imagined, because we want to have some sort of independence. And let's see what happens, right? There's always a silver lining behind every cloud, as painful as it is, especially with regards to children and the suffering that they are undergoing in these conflicts. And I will say in summary, I'm going to try to summarize all the things, just a few lines. History is the stone that the angel throws to warn us. America, with its two faces, has gone through its cycles of victory for the ideas that it espouses, such as was the case of the Amistad court case in 1841. It's detailed in my book. Abolition of slavery, Reconstruction, civil rights, affirmative action, New Deal, EPA, voting rights, unions, workers' rights. Whistleblower protections and periods when its dark underbelly reared its head, such as Jim Crow, the McCarthy era, Roy Cohn, voter suppression, Dred Scott and the KKK, the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and January 6th insurrection, are very important. They've played important parts in helping us come to understand and in bringing to light the dark underbelly of America. Now, that it has always managed, right, the face that veers towards the light has always managed to keep the monster, that is the other face that veers towards the darkness, from coming fully out of the abyss. But we've arrived at a point where it no longer can. As a matter of fact, that other face now covers, has darkened the light, shut out the light, but not completely. Now the beast is fully out. It has now become the powerhouse of Nazism, the perfect Aryan paradise. America has become that. The old Nazis now have a true base, and indeed they really are in the eyes of the soul, the Nazis are here again. Through the eyes of the soul, it is America in which many of the souls who were present in Germany have reincarnated. This was their chance. Now we are looking at the replay. The population is almost evenly divided between those who choose to return to the dark days of slavery, hate, extremism, feudalism, Jim Crow, but with a slight edge to those who desire to progress up the ladder of soul restoration. So there is a chance. Thank you for visiting my channel, and please do not forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. And as usual, I end with the following. Hate hitching a ride. Hate a contagion, a cancer metastasizing, an opportunistic bacteria, the cloud waiting to block the sun. Hate waiting to hitch a ride on the train of love. Hate the rat on its rat passage, hitching a ride on the boat to the plague. Hate the bedbug waiting for our suitcase. Hate the roach riding on our coattails. Hate the shadow always lurking behind, sometimes longer than us. Hate just lurking behind the thin curtain, waiting for its turn on center stage to take us to a place not so far away. A blast back from civilization to barbarism, from knowledge back to ignorance, from wisdom back to imprudence. Hate never takes a holiday, always looking for the opportunity to hitch a ride on the train of love. Hate inhabits the same house as love within us. None of us is without blemish. All of us live in glass houses. We're all brothers in this brotherhood of man. God the Creator, that something that is greater than us, has no chosen few. He gave unto us the vehicle that is reincarnation to help us bring our souls back into equilibrium. That something that is greater than us is not vindictive, selective, or supremacist in ideology and practices. That something that is greater than us bequeath unto none lands. That something that is greater than us would not be so short-sighted, cynical, and cruel, because seas and oceans rise and they drown or cover lands. Volcanoes erupt and cover lands with ashes and lava, and earthquakes swallow us and our belongings. No, do not believe anyone who tries to feed you that Kool-Aid that God gave any group, any parcel of land. We cannot fight for or on the behalf of that something that is greater than us. That something that is greater than us doesn't need us to defend it. That is arrogance at its height. We're all tenants on this earth, not here to have dominion or rule over anything or anyone. We're not here to have dominion over the fowl of the air, the fish in the sea, or the beasts in the fields. We're not here to rule and have supremacy over our brothers. Let us be good tenants. Let us take care of ourselves and each other. let us trod ever so lightly and take care of this planet we call Earth and all the creatures that dwell thereon. Remember that there is something greater than us, that is the fatherhood of God. And we respect and show love for that something that is greater than us by taking care of ourselves and our brothers. May we never try to free our conscience so that we will always do correct actions. May we learn to walk a mile in our brother's shoes so that we can see the humanity in each other. May we respect the differences in each other and know that our Creator has no chosen few. May we find comfort in the knowledge that each of us is slated for redemption. None is excluded. May we find solace in the knowledge that it is not a question of if, but one of when. Each of us shall return to our Father. May we know that we're just tenants on this earth and take care of each other, the earth and all the creatures that dwell thereon. May we always adhere to the divine principles of the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, doing unto others as we would have others. My guides love to say, them do unto us. Love. May we know that which I do unto my brother, I do unto myself, for I am my brother's keeper. May the tiny shrouds of light forever illuminate our path through the dark. May peace reside forever within us and between us. One divine, universal love. Thank you once again for watching my channel.